Hi everyone, welcome to the second one of the ICT and Development Seminar Series. I'm very happy to introduce Jenny Chan today. Jenny is a lecturer of sociology, just joined the university 6 months ago at the School of Interdisciplinary Area Studies. She got her degrees at the Chinese University of Hong Kong and the University of Hong Kong, and she was a Reed Research Scholar when doing her PhD at the University of London. She's a board member of the International Sociological Association's Research Committee on Labour Movements. She's published her work in quite an impressive array of sociology, labour studies, and Asia studies journals. And at the moment, she's writing a book called Dying for an iPhone, The Hidden Struggles of China's Workers. So I think we'll get a few tasters of what will be in the book, and maybe you can tell us a bit about when the book might be out so that we can read it.
So, and I hope the legal person could endorse the name.
So, well, we're very honored to have her here today, so please just join me in welcoming her.
Good afternoon. My name is Jenny, and thank you so much for Mark's warm invitation and all of you here. I'm so glad that you will come to this talk. And I have been a labor rights activist in Hong Kong before I start doing my lectureship here in September. So my work has been trying to combine activism as well as academic research. So how successful we have been doing, you will give me some feedback regarding to what I present to you today. And this is based on my own PhD research as well as a collective team effort. Dying for an iPhone. This is a very heavy title, and it all starts from 4 years ago, when there were 18 suicides in one single year, 2010 in China, and they are all girls and boys who were from the countryside, and they were working for a big company called Foxconn Technology Group. 18 workers who were all between 17 and 25 years old, and they jumped from the factory dormitories, the factory buildings, to their death. 14 will die, 4 survived with crippling injuries. So what happened? This is one of the poems that I find it on the internet and then translated. The workers say, perhaps for the Foxconn employees and employees like us, the use of death is simply to testify that we were ever alive at all, and that while we live, we had only despair. So what had driven these young workers to their death? We begin to try to understand, does it related to work, or what are the other reasons that would have the results they take such a desperate action? Because committing suicide is such a cruel human experience. And we began our journey to understand the reason behind. What strikes us is that the management, instead of finding out the root cause for suicide tragedy, but put up all these safety nets around the building. So it is a kind of net that try to catch the jumpers and prevent more suicides. But does it help at all in setting up this kind of safety management system? So she is one of the survivors that I talked to since 2010, 11, and follow all her life from recovery in the hospital and go back to the countryside where she was from. So she is one of the 18 survivors. When she jumped in March 2010, she was only 17 years old. She was working in a business group called IDPBG, Integrated Digital Product Business Group. This is one of the biggest business groups from within Foxconn. There were more than a dozen business groups. They compete against each other in terms of product quality, delivery schedule, and there were lots of criteria that each business group will compete against each other. So this business group is special in the sense that it only produces for Apple exclusively. So the more deeper underlying reasons for the pressure on the shop floor, this is one of the mystery that we want to unravel. So we have been talking to her and understand that this is not just a personal, individual stories, but it brings us to a bigger macro changes in China. So in these past more than 30 years, there have been a huge change in China. More than 260 million workers, like the young girl you have just seen, they migrate from poor villages to the big towns or cities to look for jobs. And this generation is different from those who moved to the cities in the 80s or 90s to look for a job. This generation is much younger and also very resourceful. They would be also hoping like you to aspire the dream to become a university student or even graduate. And right now, they did finish 9 years education, and some of them also attain a high school certificate. So they are better educated. They also have higher expectation about what their future could be. So this is the major reason when we see there were very important driving forces for them to leave their parents, their loved ones, when they just finished school and look for a better paid job or more security in the city. So city is everywhere. It seems life happens. Vis-a-vis, the countryside looks to be just a death and without much job opportunities and advancements. So behind China's miracle, we cannot deny the contributions of these millions of migrant workers in China. China's economic achievement is stunning. Just last year, China surpassed the States to become the world's largest economic power. So in terms of the actual volume of output, that is 17.6 trillion US dollars. This is huge. And back into around the global financial crisis moment, China recovered much quicker than the other countries and surpassed Japan as the largest exporting nation. And also, we see the graph here. So we still project that China will have high growth, even though the growth rate seems to be slowing down. However, the trend is overall uprising. So I want to situate the personal working stories in a broader political economy that behind China's great economic success, when China precisely integrate into the global economy, into the export capitalist system, and especially high-tech electronics, China has achieved so much, but also intensified labor conflicts at the point of production. But on the shop floor, we also see that when there were high pressure, there also seems to be the driving force for resistance. There would not be labor or environmental resistance when there are so much driving forces and pressure behind. So I want to articulate that on the one hand, there are the dominating forces that exerted by the global brands, the subcontractors, the management. But on the other hand, there were also resistance or human agency here. So this is the dialectics that we want to explore further. And we conduct field work, field research in China for these 4 years. First of all, give you a very quick idea about what is Foxconn, what drives the young girl, as well as more than 100 million workers who are looking for new opportunities. And this is one of the biggest corporations that the workers want to go and find a job here. Foxconn is a Taiwanese company. In these 4 decades, it grew from just a very small processing factory into the global leader. In the manufacturing industry, Foxconn is #1. According to Fortune Global 500 company list in terms of the annual revenue. It is about 32nd place. Do you know what other companies that are ahead of Foxconn? Which companies are the biggest and on the top of the list?
Apple?
Yeah, you got it. Apple number 5, and also there are other companies like Walmart number 1, and oil companies, big Chinese firms. So this gives you some idea about the fact that as a manufacturer, a Taiwanese invested company in China, it has been growing so fast and become such a global power on the global scale. And this is the largest production site in China, in Guangdong province. Only in this factory, at the peak, they have more than 400,000 employees who go to work a day and night on a 12-hour shift. We look at the name of the company, Foxconn. Have you ever thought about the name? Because in the very beginning, back in 2010, everyone might have heard about Sony, HP, Apple, or other brands, but you rarely heard about Foxconn. And some journalists, when they call us, they would ask, oh, are you working on a research called Foxconn? So we are not very familiar with Foxconn. It conveys the idea that they could produce connectors, electronic connectors at high speed, very agile, flexible, like force speed. And the Chinese name Foxconn, it has a very good meaning, means wealthy and healthy, but it becomes a dark irony after the train of suicides, which the Chinese press dubbed the Suicide Express in China. So this is Foxconn, the huge production site in southern part of China. This is a Taiwanese-owned company. And inside the factory, there are not only canteens, restaurants, sports grounds, really like a university campus, but they also have a wedding dress shop. Wedding dress shop. So many young employees right here. We are not just producing iPhones, iPads for the global consumers. We are also creating dreams. A dream of having romance, family, marriage, and even our next generation. So this is a place that really make so many young workers in China who are motivated to find a global company like Foxconn and to work in. We do some analysis by interviewing the factory managers. That is more informal because you could imagine as we, the activists, it is so difficult to get the managers sit down and talk to us about their corporate strategies, about the relationship with their brands. So we do some interviews with the managers, but in an informal setting. And we understand that of all the big star company buyers, Apple is the largest. More than 40% of the revenue of Foxconn is from one buyer alone, and that is Apple. Foxconn has become the largest electronics empire in the world. When we compare Foxconn to other contract electronics manufacturer, it is 4 times much higher than the second one, Flextronics. And you will see from this map, in China, Foxconn has the largest production sites, not only in Shenzhen, the picture I show you, but also in the central part of Zhengzhou, and also in the southwestern part of Chengdu. So all these 2 sites, they only produce iPads for Apple, and that one only produce iPhone for Apple. So Apple seems, after 2010 suicide tragedy, to control more in terms of the supply chain, so that when problems happen, it might not be related to me, Apple alone. We can talk more about the spatial significance or the production network later on. And I also want to give you a quick sense that Foxconn has huge production sites in Eastern Europe as well, Czech Republic, and then Brazil and other places. But still, overall, with the more than 1 million employees around the group, the predominant significance is still in China, given all the advantages. The government provides cheap land, human resources, and all the infrastructure support. This is a zoom-in map to show you the scale of production of Foxconn in China. Is almost like colonized of China by Foxconn with the map. You see all the red dots here. Do you see clearly? So they are the places where Foxconn set up their production sites. They also have R&D, research and development centers. So this is so huge, more than 30 production sites all around China. That is why it is not just me alone. I almost changed my PhD topic so radically after the suicide and work on it for 4 years. But this is not just an individual work. I also have a team of fellow classmates as well as our professors who join together and produce the collective research. So what we find, first of all, to understand what happened inside the factory, it is not just a story of the secret, something inside. We also have to look broader about the global system. And outsourcing here is the key we have to understand. Apple had been specialized on product development, design. We love Apple MacBook, the Mac Air you're using, and the marketing, branding. But who actually made these products? That is by outsourcing the low value added parts to, first of all, Japan, and then Taiwanese, Korean producers. And later on, when China opened up in the late 70s or 80s, China grew rapidly. And the whole idea is the fact that when Foxconn grew over the decades in terms of technological innovation, engineering capacity, Apple also grew quickly. So this is a very delicate relationship between the big buyer and the big supplier, but still who are getting more power to shape the production rhythm as well as the terms and conditions. This is the buyer-driven model. It is Apple who could determine the prices, the delivery schedule, as well as the very sophisticated, detailed product design and requirements that Foxconn and other suppliers have to meet. And this all translates very high pressure onto the workers on the front line and also managers in the middle. With the outsourcing of those low value add manufacturing jobs to the developing countries like China and other places, Apple becomes the most profitable company in the world with very sophisticated supply chain management. And when we just follow the latest profit report, the financial results of Apple, we are astonished by the fact that just in one quarter, it could earn 18 billion in terms of the net profit. And it is also the most valuable brands in the world, had already overtaken Google and Samsung to be the first one. And take a look at this line chart. That is the most important, which shows you the highly uneven distribution of the value between the big two companies. Apple, after deducting the operating cost, so operating margins is the measure or the tool that we could compare the profitability of two companies. And after deducting the costs like salaries, depreciation, or other costs, Apple remains at quite a high level, and then Foxconn relatively at a flat bottom line. The more concrete example to show you, for example, if an iPhone is selling at $100, how much actually Apple is getting is nearly 60%, the lion's share. Yes, Apple always face keen competitions in the market from Samsung and other big brands, but still the branding, the consumers' favorite preferences, Apple had the biggest share. suppliers and raw materials is only about 1/5, and the Chinese workers, just a very tiny slime. Out of per assembling one iPhone, what workers could got, it is so tiny. And don't forget that before 2010, Foxconn is the only assembler for Apple. And in this power relations, what Foxconn will get and ultimately workers will have in their pocket in terms of the monthly income, that is still much less. And I want to also let you know that it is not just about the cost pressure, it is also about the time. Because in just-in-time production, when the goal is to minimize stock, because stock will take up space and it will increase the cost if those goods are not sold out. So speed, to just make it right on time to fulfill the customers' or consumers' needs, we have to speed up the whole production process. From 2010 up to now, iPhone had been upgraded from Model 4, 4S, 5, 5S, 5C, 5 different colors. And we might want to have 6 different colors or 7 colors. And then iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus, a bigger screen iPhone. So imagine behind the high change of the model, the product cycle is getting shorter than ever. And on the factory floor, those slogans drive workers to work even harder and with higher discipline. Achieve goals or the sun will no longer rise. Value efficiency every minute, every second, because time is money. Execution is the integration of speed, accuracy, and precision. There's no best way, but always there are better ways to do something, and the devil is in the detail. So you could imagine when workers are so-called behind the precise second production schedule, they will be always shouted at, yelled at. So it is also a matter about human dignity and the basic respect that is not there on the shop floor. And now I want to bring you into the video that me and my 2 friends did in 2011 when I, for the first time, went to the iPad production factory as an undercover researcher. So I just put on the uniform as a Foxconn worker and do the filming with a small camera. And all the interviews are done by us. So I would now like to show it to you, and then you would visualize what are the production environment and the conditions really like. Okay, so Mark, we are going to show the video, and Mark is my assistant today.
I can't think of a product that has defined an entire category and has then been completely redesigned in such a short period of time.
I 致我最高的歉意。
富士康成都科技园区的建设得到了国家、省市各级政府的高度重视，被荣称为四川省1号工程。
那个啥子1号工程，哪个敢说不办了？他就是打个名号嘛。你说和加拿大个名号签不了国家代嘛，永远是以国家地嘛。
这样的人就这样拿过来问，就是到负责工作看合伙的是这样子。这个政府哈，他们的规定有任务的是这样子。 就分配到每个政府的头上去嘛？你就这样招工还不疯狂吗？我觉得是很疯狂的嘛。
我们来的时候是政府说这里包吃包住1600啊，来了以后呢，都不是事实。
他们这个富士康工资跟待遇非常平稳。
It's just amazing. It's just amazing. It's just amazing.
The iPad 2 really is defined by the display. There are just no distractions. By reducing what were essentially 3 surfaces to 2, we got rid of the structural wall around the perimeter of the product and eliminated the edge.
本来在富士康就流传这样一句话嘛，女人当男人用嘛，男人就当机器用，就这样的。
我说我们起得比地道嘛，睡得比狗安嘛，吃得比猪长嘛。
今天晚上发生在成都富士康车间的爆炸，最新的消息是2人死亡，16人受伤。
发生事故的地点是工厂区3楼，生产平板电脑、铝制材料后背的打磨生产车间。爆炸原因初步查明是打磨的铝制粉尘在管道内堆积，遇电器开关打火，在排风筒内引起爆炸。
肯定想让我们帮助我们一下，了解一下我们，了解一下我们这个工程师怎么生活的。
其实人性化不是喊出来的，是做出来的。
So this is the 6-minute video we upload onto YouTube, and then we will continue with some more slides later. I want to really share with you the first time I met.
iPhone maker rallies workers after China suicides. In Shenzhen, China, workers who typically spend their weeks putting together iPhones and other gadgets.
There we go.
Okay, magical. Yeah, when I first saw those polishing workers who have to fine-tune the product, the aluminum case, and the fine particles concentrate in the air, and at the right condition, it explodes. So the fire and the gas and the bad conditions killed 4 workers instantly, and then their families lost their sons and their daughters. And when I saw them, they looked like the coal miners. I never imagined that the condition would be so bad. That's supposed to be air-conditioned, advanced manufacturing, high-tech sites. But indeed, behind all these shining gadgets we are using, there are always some dark or hidden side that we could pay more attention to. And what is most heartbroken was the fact that we actually finished the rough cut, the first draft of the video and the reports, and sent it to both Foxconn and Apple, because Apple is the only buyer at this Chengdu site for the iPad. We even published it on the 1st of May, the International Day in 2011, and The Guardian picked up the story. Just 1 week later, on the 7th of May, Foxconn replied and said, our conditions are perfect, safe and healthy. And then 2 weeks later, on the 20th of May 2011, the explosion happened. So we had done everything to try to prevent the man-made accident, but still couldn't prevent it. And in Hong Kong, so our groups, the students, activists, we always try to arouse public awareness and concerns, because we, the consumers, as a group, we could have our power to change the conditions. And Apple promised so much in terms of high labor and human and environmental standards, but does it live up to the standard? So these are the activities that we have been trying to do in Hong Kong. And also, most recently, last Christmas, BBC Panorama, there was a very good program. So I want to let you know that the fact is, it is not just an isolated one-off problem. It is repeatedly, recurrently happen time and again. So what is the chronic problem there? Are there any possibilities of changing the problems? Because this BBC Panorama shows you what happened to those child workers and workers in China who are assembling our iPhone 6. And then it also zoomed into Indonesia, where those young boys, they are extracting raw materials from dangerous mines with their little hands unprotected. So it is also the environmental crisis that we are tackling, and occupational health and environmental issues, they are closely intertwined. What Apple have been doing, given the fact that it has money and it has also a certain degree of change and mastery over its suppliers, Apple once again assured us that it has more than 1,400 employees who are stationed inside each and every Chinese major suppliers to overlook the production process. And that's true, only production process. They don't look so much into workers' well-being and their basic rights issue. And China becomes such a significant market vis-a-vis the European growth or Australian market. So Apple once more in its like an annual ritual in their supplier responsibility progress reports assure us that in only 1 year, 2013, we conduct 451 inspections on site in the factory. What does it mean? It is meaning more than one audit a day, and that is a double, more than 51% when compared to the previous year. And with my two co-authors, Poon Ai, who is based in Hong Kong and Beijing, a very outstanding sociologist concerned about Chinese labor rights issues, and Mark Sheldon, a historian based in Cornell and New York University, very much concerned about Chinese development. And we are writing a book, and we wrote a letter to CEO Tim Cook. We also wrote a letter to Steve Jobs when he was still alive until October 2011. So the reply, the standard one is they send us more than 100 pages. The conditions, the requirements that suppliers have to fulfill if they want to continue doing business with Apple. So all these standards, yes, they are even much more promising than the already very good Chinese labor law. But all these, quite similarly, are well written on the books. But what it comes in reality, there is a huge gap. Once more, Apple take another step, not just in-house audit, but they also contract, that means pay money to Fair Labor Association to do the so-called third party or independent audit. But don't forget, FLA receive money from its member companies. And will you then criticize openly what the person, Apple, will pay you for? You will not. So there also have been information that is distorted and covered up. One more important step, Apple says we also collaborate with academics, and they are all outstanding labor rights scholars who have been concerned about globalization and human labor rights issues. I have studied a lot these great academics during my PhD, Mary Gallen, Eli Freeman, and there were so many. So if they are under the invitation of Apple and they could conduct research into the suppliers, especially Foxconn in China, what would be their findings? What are their standpoint and analysis? Up to this moment, we still do not have any proper information to assess whether their findings would be in support of workers to alleviate the pressure workers are facing, to make sure Apple also takes its responsibility. What is its responsibility? It is not just setting up the rosy high standards, but it is the fact that whether they reflect on their own purchasing practice, it is sustainable, is it fair, is it ethical? This is still the black box. We don't know how much Apple is really willing to pay more to Foxconn or other suppliers, so that perhaps the manufacturers will also pay a bit more for the workers, and workers would have a work and life balance, not just working continuously for more overtime to make ends meet. But all these issues are not answered. So it comes again to workers themselves, whether they as a group would have their voices being heard, join together and create some more lasting changes. So workers' own resistance, their organized action, as well as we, the supporters, that is crucial. They themselves nowadays use cell phones. When you go into their collective dormitories, you rarely find that they might using iPads or laptop, but each of them would have their cell phones. Cell phone create another whole new world. I could meet my friend, my boyfriend or girlfriend over the phone, and it also creates some space or freedom for me to post online what I feel in China or what I find my future is. So there have been lots of very colorful stories, poems, essays, yeah, very fascinating how they use technologies to make their own voices being heard. And this is the very striking picture workers themselves sent off to labor rights groups as well as the media. They threaten to commit a collective suicide, jump from the building, but just as a means to negotiate for fair pay. It doesn't really mean that they want to jump and kill themselves, but they are smart because they know media would pay attention to Apple's sweatshops or these scandal, and they use the same strategy, suicide, as a point to get media attention. And besides from taking direct actions, some workers will also file lawsuits at the courts in China. But do you see any challenge that they will face when they use the legal avenue to redress their grievances? Yes, you're right. They will encounter lots of problems in terms of time, money, resources, and whether the outcomes would be impartial and favorable to them. But still, you can see, because China had been doing so deep in terms of the legal reform, there have been so many new laws and regulations, and in particular after 2008, the implementation of the new contract law, it really emboldened workers, and workers see some hope of using law as their weapon to fight back. So you see the red line there, the increase in the cases where workers file their grievances in government committees, the labor disputes arbitration committees. And it only goes down a little bit because Chinese economy recovered right after the 2008 global financial crisis. But still, overall, the fact that workers have to pay for their lawyers or go through the very long procedure to have their justice done, this is a very painful process. And for labor rights groups or trade unions in the West, we have been joining consumers to organize campaigns to make sure that we, the Apple fans, we love using Apple or Sony or Samsung products. But nowadays, these big brands also use common suppliers like Foxconn because it is reliable, it's quick, and cost-effective. So indeed, I also can't differentiate which brands might be better. But at the moment, Apple promised so much, and it has the ability to make some changes. So quite a large amount of efforts, we are targeting Apple and just make some icons and get the media attention. And finally, when the Apple store opened in Hong Kong, we also open a very long banner and say no more slavery. Behind iPhone or iPads, there are also iSlaves, but no more iSlaves. Finally, we are now writing a book. This is the Spanish version that is being translated by a worker cooperative in Argentina. We are very proud of the workers co-op, and they had translated the book, but the English one, we are actually facing some technical, legal issues and others, but we will speed up and try to finish it as soon as possible this year. So finally, I want to conclude. First of all, these transnational corporations from the big buyers like Apple and their outsourced supplier like Foxconn, they bear joint responsibility for the problem of chronic labor abuses and environmental pollutions and other problems. And the Chinese government, they are not just one side. Yes, they want to draw in business, attract investors, and they always bend the rules and regulations in favor of the investors. But given the fact that workers are protesting and striking and demanding improvement, so the Chinese government, for the sake of stability and legitimacy in governance, it also give in a way of increasing the minimum wages, rebalancing the economy, promoting more workers' rights and benefits, improving the law. So these are the changes on the ground. However, overall, we still see the institutional issue, and the big barrier here is how local government and capital collude together at the sacrifice of workers' rights. But finally, it is workers, whether they could claim the rights of organizing. We understand that the All China Federation of Trade Union, ACFTU, the only official unions in China that is directly under the Chinese government and at the shop floor level, it is not much about the political problem. It is more about the managerial domination, where the managers always double head as the trade union chairman or chairwomen. that means the trade union rarely represent workers' voices. So it is how workers themselves could really join forces and bargain effectively for their rights. And I would welcome your questions and feedback and how to really make the campaign more effective, how to make the explicit demands to the government companies. I think these are the real challenge that we as the activist scholars are also facing nowadays. So thank you so much for your time. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jenny. This was really powerful and sobering in many ways.
Wow.
We have some time for questions. I might take the liberty of asking you the first one, and then we can open up the floor a bit. I think it's worth maybe explicitly sort of reiterating that it is sort of contemporary modern technologies that allow this global division of labor that we see, and allow these quote unquote efficiencies that we see, and allow 75% of the final product to be captured as profits, right? But what I'd ask you is if you could say a bit more about whether you're hopeful that, for instance, any of this massive surplus, any of this massive profit that we see could be ultimately reinvested in the livelihoods of workers that are creating those profits. It's obviously hard to build solidarity or organization when companies can easily shift production geographically across sites of production. So I think maybe a question of our time is whether some of these same technologies allowing for this globally distributed production can be used to build any sort of more powerful organization.
Right. Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. A very inspiring and important questions for all of us to discuss and brainstorm. I may not give the only answer, but first of all, yes, factories or capital becomes so mobile. We even have the footloose factories. We close down the shop in country A and then move it to Bangladesh, where we got the building collapse and other tragedies. So there have been these kind of move, but no matter where you go, you need a place to start building together to get your raw materials, people, and the machines in place. So this is a spatial fix that is just temporary, postponing the crisis if we follow the arguments of Beverly Silver or David Harvey or others. So we are still hopeful in a sense that, yes, it would dampen or demoralize workers in the original place, but in every new investment site, there are also new hopes when workers get together, articulate their voices, and build their solidarity. And companies as rich as Apple, they have to take responsibility, and they will not willingly, voluntarily do it. They have to be forced and compelled to do it. So we do have concrete proposal. For example, in China, the credible independent scholars and company people, Foxconn, we have to work together. We provide labor rights training programs for workers who could join, understand their rights, and we elect their trade unions to make it representative, democratic, and transparent. But still, Foxconn shut the door, so we do not have any way to go inside the factory and kind of support the organizing. But we have been doing a lot of work in the community level. So I could talk more about that later if you're interested.
Thank you. There's a lot of hands up. Would it make most sense to take 2 or 3 questions at a time and then see? So if we could we'll take 3 here and then we'll work our way around. So there's 1, 2, and 3.
The end of the supply chain is not Apple. The end is the consumer. When Shell did something bad, there was a big boycott against Shell. When Nestle did something bad in Nigeria, there was a big movement. There's no movement against Apple, except very sporadic. But there's no organized movement in front of Apple stores to boycott Apple, because this is the only thing why is that the case? And the second thing is that it's also not finished because Apple doesn't pay taxes either. There's a documentation of 300 pages, high-tech, untaxed, that Apple, Microsoft, Google, and so on do not pay taxes, except I think 6%. So this is half of the story. They not only make a lot of money, they also don't pay taxes anywhere.
Who was the second question? Well, there was one here.
Yeah, I'm actually going to sneak two in very quickly. The first is just specifically in the Panorama documentary. I know they brought up the idea that there could be a potential benefit to Apple being required to be the brand of the factory as well, like where instead of it being a Foxconn factory, it would truly be an Apple branded factory. I was just wondering if you could speak to that, if that would be a benefit to workers' rights. And then my second question is, has there been any solidarity or outreach from Apple retail workers in the United States or around the world?
Maybe we can take one more. In front of Ralph, you and yes.
I just wonder whether you've explored at all trying to use, it's kind of weak, but it's something, the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, the national contact point, raise a case in the States.
Mm-hmm.
Apple should be controlling their suppliers.
Right. So thank you very much for the rich discussions here, and I like your addition that Apple and other big companies, they have the tax evasion problems or other irresponsibilities. Yeah, whether boycotting Apple or not, it also relates to more progressive or engaging and empowerment strategies. Yes, we could temporarily not use Apple, but then what else we will be using? Maybe just Samsung or other brand products, and more or less they are still assembled by Foxconn or Packaging or other suppliers. And you might also have been aware that if the orders will totally cut, workers will also lose their jobs. So whether boycotting or not will be the most effective means. At some point, yes, we have to show the very clear message and argument that this is not acceptable, and we could not tolerate or complicit in the injustice and at such a global, massive scale. So we as consumers, perhaps we could really do something. And I like what you have suggested. Perhaps we could share more information and also take action. Just what kind of action that might be more long-lasting, or that workers could be also a part in it. Perhaps workers could prioritize what are their demands, improving the dormitory conditions. When you see the video, very unhygienic and bad safety conditions, very dangerous indeed. The construction site was not ready, but because we cannot wait, so you're right, consumers cannot wait, Apple of course cannot wait, because time is money and I want to produce much more than what I can do now. So this is a really big issue. So, but consumer education, public education, that will be useful. And OECD guideline, I jumped to that, OECD guideline or other important framework that is promoted by John Ruggie or other people at the UN level or OECD guidelines that regulate multinational companies when they engage in transnational or global production. I appreciate the value a lot, but again, whether it is binding, legally binding, or what or how, we can really make use of those tools in China, where even the Chinese law could be so relaxed and disregard of. So this is the issue, perhaps in the neoliberal contemporary society we are in. The state is no longer the socialist state that adhere to equality or workers' own labor value. It is also a compromise how companies could see China as a friendly and a good place to invest. So if there are some more ideas about how we could really make use of international rules and other tools, let us really explore and see how to work it out. That is important, because even Apple itself, if you look into that 104 pages and their 2016 supplier report, I and another colleague, we have been checking the website every day since the 1st of January to now, because it becomes like a pattern that the report will come out today or tomorrow, so very soon now. So we want to still emphasize the point that we are not lacking these kind of standards or norms. But it is the fact that you never think of what is the impact, negative impact on the high-speed production on workers' own body and their mind. That is why they feel so desperate in making tiny assembling jobs every day. There is no life, no hope, just live on. Yeah. And your question about the retailers in the States, could you elaborate a bit on that so that I might respond better?
Well, I just know that Apple retail employees are like traditionally not treated very well by Apple either in terms of the hours, and that it's a lot of they privilege part-time work so that you can never get enough hours to work. And I know that there have been strikes, or not strikes, but attempts at organizing in the States, Apple retail employees. And I was wondering if you've heard of any.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. I also read that very long investigative journalism piece. There have been, indeed, what I see also hopeful is, first of all, you are all here. You do not use your 1 hour or so to just go to sleep or engage in. You are very busy. You are super busy as well, but you share your concern. So yes, there have been more publicity, media publicity from New York Times, The Guardian, The Independent, and there have been lots of discussions about these retail workers, their workers' rights and job security. That is also very precarious. And yes, Apple doesn't pay much better than other stores. And whether these service workers on the front line could also perhaps build some solidarity with workers in the production world, I think that is a very great linkage if we could build it up. Yes, I agree. There are similarities in the sense that how corporations, in terms of cost cutting, improving efficiency, and maximizing the shareholders' benefits or profits instead of giving adequate accountability to direct producers, and that is the workers. This is not something we fundamentally share the value. So if once we challenge this idea, things might be changed. And I would say that perhaps unions is a good way, whether retail workers could join, let's say, American unions or global unions, and effectively make some collective contracts and set, let's say, living wage or other terms and conditions. Right now, because of our limited resources, as you see, in Foxconn's factories in China, they have more than 1 million workers. Every time when I conduct a field work, I don't know how to start because it is hundreds and thousands of workers who are flooding out of the factory gate. So you need trust, you need lots of time to really build the connections so the workers would open up and share with you that, yes, if today I quit Foxconn's job, I might get another job, but that could be just at the same pay, worse than Foxconn, or slightly better. But where I am going, it is really the entire logic of global capitalism. That is the matter of the heart. And whether we could have more progressive and alternative form of production economies, that is another issue that we have been struggling and keep thinking about. Yeah, instead of plugging China's suppliers into the global supply chain. And at the bottom of the train, you still remember the pie chart or the line chart. The profit share is so tiny. It doesn't really make workers who would feel secure and have the money that could support a home in the city. And it is really at the trap of no way to advance and also no possibility to retreat that we interpret suicide as a protest.
Shall we move around a bit more and take 3 more questions? Ralph, and then the first 2 hands that were here.
Yeah, I mean, as you're probably familiar with the work of Quan Li, right, and the different strategies in China, and I just wonder whether you reflect to it. I mean, you seem very much towards the side of unionization, solidarity with labor, also with the US and so on. But as you know, that's one kind of strategy to kind of simplify things. The other strategy is solidarity with everyone in China for getting rights that are enforced legally, contracts not vis-a-vis one company or another or one sector or another, but rights that are enforced that force companies to give you better wages enforced through law. In other words, a kind of state-oriented strategy, which is much more, oriented at all workers, including the public sector. Now, I just wonder, do you have a sense of what the workers you speak to, which strategy they actually think is more successful, and perhaps you have an idea of what is more successful in this regard?
Yes.
My question concerns the paradox of the workers' rights. So on the one hand, it's of course very easy to label us the Foxconn as the sweatshop. But on the other hand, after the suicide incident happened, some of my journalist friends, they went to the factory, and their argument is actually different from the overwhelming online outrage at that time. They say if you said Foxconn is a sweatshop, it's actually one of the best sweatshop in China because it already provides relatively decent pay and better management. So Foxconn. So if we are talking about workers' rights, if these Chinese workers, they do not work for factories like Foxconn, they actually do not even have the survival right. So, but in recent years, the things have been changing. Like the Chinese migrant workers, they now have higher requirements of the basic salary. So there is a trend that some factories like Foxconn, they already transfer their outsourcing centers to other southeastern countries. So do you think in this trend, if like China is moving toward the upper end of this global production chain, can that automatically improve the workers' right in China?
My question is kind of related to Ralph's question about the union, and it's more case specific because I'm wondering, like, how representative the union is in Foxconn, because the frequency of the workers might change their jobs, and also because maybe there are limited time for union jobs, union positions. So how representative is it? And also, I remember reading Pan Ni's book, in 90s. She wrote like the women worker at that time, like mostly based on their kinship relationship and the xiangyuan, which is the people from the same location. So I'm wondering like how effective the kinship support and the people from same hometown might be useful for the workers in terms of their seeking for the rights in Foxconn. Thank you.
And also maybe we take yours.
The mobile industries had some success in getting conflict minerals out of the supply chain, so like coltan and Indonesian tin mining, and that's mostly due, I think, it's the Dodd-Frank Act in the States and I was looking up, I couldn't remember the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. So there does seem to be some global pressure from governments and from industry to get rid of that nasty element of mobile phones. Do you think that sort of global pressure from governments and from trade bodies can also improve workers' rights and the conditions in these factories?
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks so much. We're really broadening our imaginations, and I feel more hopeful and gaining energies because of hearing from you. Yes, more state-centered approach that is so important. We have been facing some danger in terms of doing these investigations as well, because the biggest investors like Foxconn in Sichuan in the post-earthquake happened a very deadly one in 2008 in May, and then since then the provincial level government had redoubled the effort of getting more investment, and Foxconn built the whole new iPad factories in October 2010. So Foxconn had a nickname like the Maya of the city. It is influential, it is a king of investor. So given all these direct interests and deep-lying linkages, the privileges given by the local officials to investors, it is so hard and difficult for us to make a voice. But we did write letters to the ACFTU, the official trade union in China, and also the state council, which sometimes will put pro-worker policies. So yes, there have been some dialogues. We would also influence, and hopefully the government would take harder measures and protect workers' rights. But we always see the deep tensions and contradictions there. And if we just go too much, perhaps the private company security guards from Foxconn, as well as the public security forces, they would not really tolerate. Especially, I'm talking about if we strategize or organize protest actions. But yes, we will not do it so upfront or public or visible. But I just want to tell you that we are the campaigners or activists that is not purely sitting in a library and writing up all these analyses. It really tackles with the deep interest and the vested interest of all these dominant players, companies or governments, or government as companies. So we have to still think of what are our priorities and what we realistically can achieve and what we cannot. But as I say, we have a community-based organizing method. We set up a workers' center so that workers could come during their off-work hours and train up in leadership or other kinds of skills that might be useful to them. And again, we have been hearing discussions about the fact that Foxconn is not the worst, and I could assure you, Foxconn is not really the worst. But let us face the fact that Foxconn is an effective window for us to see the big forces behind it. It is the global brands which shape the production regime, the production schedule, the pricing, and all the conditions. So Foxconn is actually a very important global workplace, as well as other similar global workplaces that we see all these tensions and power in play. We are also arguing the basic acceptable level of labor rights standards. We are not saying whether we have jobs or no jobs. We are setting the minimum acceptable standards that we strive for. There would be relocations, there would be worse factories, much worse than that, but we are hoping to get better ones. And there should be the redistribution of profits along the trains. Can you believe that Apple is not capable of lifting up their unit prices when they beat the order of Foxconn or Packagon? They can, but it is the capitalist organization which try to maximize profits while polishing its image. So corporate social responsibility policy as a PR policy or as something real and effective, that is always a question mark. And Foxconn unions are dominated by the CEO's assistants for since 2007, when the Foxconn union was set up to now. Foxconn union was set up on the last day of 2006 because there had been another scandal about the iPod factory in 2006, but then the government took the opportunity to set up the union. And workers do not know much about what union means to them, but the government wants to set up a union branch at Foxconn because of the union tax and other relations. So I just want to put it short, the Foxconn unions is totally dominated by managers, and they do not have any credibility among the workers. So workers bypass unions to organize their strikes and protests. And localistic ties, where the workers, I and Mark, for example, we are from same Sichuan, and I and Ralph, we are from same Guangdong. It is always a double-edged sword. We have our solidarity, similarities, but we also sometimes exclude the others from being together. But yes, I would like to see more cultural element in play as well. So workers, they share because we are same women workers, or we have broader concerns about maternity rights or reproductive health issues. So there could be some more common points that we could draw, no matter it is based on ethnicity or based on gender or age or work positions. I am not well trained as a trade union organizer. I was born in Hong Kong, but I really hope to learn more as I write or engage in the real world politics. And finally, about the conflict minerals, we have seen child workers are being used in all these mines, or in Congo when there are the dictatorial or military regime that took over the place, but we still source from those mines and get the raw materials. There have been huge systematic campaigns over these years. Until now, we see some significant outcomes. So I'm also, again, very encouraged by these developments and the driving forces. That is a coalition led by Good Electronics, and Good Electronics is a Netherlands-based coalition that have academics, lawyers, environmentalists, labor rights people, where the country-based level, the government also get involved progressively. It seems to me that I still do not see very solid research on the active role played by a nation state or a provincial government and so on, but definitely a global civil society is shaping what the raw materials extraction process should be improved. We are not just talking about manufacturing, but also from raw materials extraction to even our disposal of the laptop and make it clean and non-toxic and environmentally friendly. Because I share with you one report I just read, and it says now in our time, we might be drinking dirty water because of the heavy metal contamination or other problems, but our next generation might be drinking poisoned water. So this is not just trying to scare all of us here, but it has been deteriorating in some parts of these more hidden supply chain. But Apple somehow is quite visible, and we make use of the leverage and target more. But there have been even worse case of leukemia or other cancer cases in Samsung's supplier and others. Yeah.
So we can invite everyone out in the hallway to continue some of the conversation over. We have some drinks and snacks that you're all invited to. We have a bit more time, so maybe we could take one or two more quick questions. Maybe I see your hand up, but maybe if there's
yes,
someone
and
who
you
hasn't
can
asked
ask
anything.
them, and they will ask you, and I am just here sitting.
Over there and here too.
So just sort of, I've been just kind of mulling it over, and we've got, pro-unions here, we've got customer action here, and I feel like, as with all the supply chain kind of issues, it's this question of we all love someone to blame, and there is no single, there's almost intersectional, it's different actors overlapping. And I'm sadly not giving you particularly positive news here, but almost throwing it out to everyone. How do you deal with that? And I'm kind of wondering whether the best is overlapping civil society. So a union's not going to work on its own without pressure on Apple. That's not going to work without. And certainly from a customer point of view, being in a position where all brands are equally implicated, how do you understand that as blame? If I try not to buy an Apple laptop, but then actually my Windows laptop is just as bad, where have you got to? And if you already own one of these products, how do you deal with that? So it was just sort of a lot of difficult questions that I had in mind that I felt like sharing. Any answers welcome.
Yeah, it's very difficult, so you have to have.
Touched upon corporate social responsibility, and the thing that I find very interesting is that you take multinational corporations and you basically give them attributes of countries or civil society organizations, and at the end of the day they're profit oriented and they will seek for the best bargain and they really don't care where it is. And I was thinking, what about using a strategy that goes after what they care about, which is their profit, and why not make corporate social responsibility a competitive advantage and not a burden that they have to invest more money or lose profit in order to encourage? And why not use the entire strategy of reframing rights and support and help for the workers as a competitive advantage rather than a burden that they have to take, which they don't as multinational corporations.
Mm-hmm. Or why not even more direct and transparent? You show us how much you are paying for building a MacBook, for example.
It's a part of corporate social responsibility, having that transparency. But just like the entire idea of framing it, not as something that, like, if you want to vote with your feet, then go for the company that has the most competitive advantage, that actually shows this is how we produce, this is what we do. Maybe that will actually get buyers to vote with their feet instead of boycotting, just diverting their investment to a company that they find more reliable.
The thing is that the customer isn't like me buying the iPhone. That's the problem. It's the shareholders.
Yes.
Like there's,
Exactly.
it doesn't like really matter that I paid $600 for this. What matters is that someone's really excited about the $3 they made on their share in this past quarter. Like
Could be,
until
but-
shareholders start waking up and realizing the impact.
Shareholders only have that power because you paid that $600 and buy that phone. If
But-
you make the shareholder care.
But in our society, this has become a given in so many ways.
I think, but haven't consumer boycotts been shown to be quite effective in some situations? And just to very quickly tell you about something that we're doing that speaks to this issue is in this department we have a project called Wiki Chains, and the goal is to create a wiki of commodity chains, and within this wiki to try and, as much as possible, flag up things that people may find distasteful hidden downstream or upstream in the commodity chain, because we don't actually know about a lot of the things that you're showing to us. And there's a long history of consumer boycotts that have been quite effective.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that like shareholders are not
I
aware
think you are
of those
right.
issues.
I'm from the real world, and what you call the real world. And the executives, the decision makers, are paid not by the salaries. Their compensation is tied to the share price. Okay.
Yeah.
Because the share price, when they get money through the share, Apple is not paying it, the market pays it. Somewhere outside, which is called the market, pays their salary, the $200 billion bonus. So the share price is the last resort, the share price. Now, who controls the share price? I tell you, the California Teacher Pension Fund, okay?
Yes.
So I think, which is the biggest institutional investor in the world, who buys all the Apple shares. I think what Californians do, the most effective thing is not boycotting or being unionized or making ethical speeches to be nicer to the workers. No, the thing is to go to the California Teacher Pension Fund. They have a manager who gets also $5 million bonus, but they have a board of trustees, which consist of teachers, not of highly paid managers, and they control his bonus. So the chain is you have to go to the trustees of the institutional investor, because the private investors play no role whatsoever. Okay? The private investor. If you buy Apple shares, it doesn't matter.
Right, right. Yeah, I agree. These institutional and ethical pension funds, we have the discussion around investor activism or ethical investment.
Investing.
Yes, so these, let's say, legal entity or representatives, they could vote or veto some decisions within the board. The Apple General Meeting, AGM, for example, if I hold lots of shares, I have stronger voice and say this is not acceptable. You have to change the company decision or ways of doing things. Yes, I think that is important vis-a-vis individual consumers. Because you're right, if I today go to Tesco, perhaps I will also look for something cheaper, better. So there is always lots of dilemmas and paradoxes in our consuming behavior as well. But as more individual consumers care, the school students, the teachers, we all care, then we would also importantly do something to support them. Even though we are not institutional investors, I do not own any shares of Apple, so we are outside the broad decision-making process. But we could still line up, as what Mark suggests, we could temporarily paralyze the Apple Store operation. It has been stunning for me that since I look into the statistics of Apple stores in China, it begins from less than 10, but now it is double 20. But still, there were lots of authorized resellers. Overall, China, 1.3 billion population and potential middle-class consumers. That is really a huge market. So where the Chinese people and citizens could also join hands to monitor the conditions within the Chinese society, that is important. And then how to build up more communications and joint forces, as what you suggest at the international level, European, American, Australian, Japan. How to build such a big global scale movement, this is of course a big challenge. Whether we have core leaders, a good structure, the wiki chain you just mentioned, I feel that this is what a sparkling idea, very nice, yes, great. So we are, every one of us may have our specialties and contribute a bit, and then together we could create some more long-lasting changes. So yes, I really hope that today, when we are here, perhaps in different ways we can do something within our own capacities.
Thanks, Jenny. Well, let's let's go out of here thinking about what we're complicit in and what we can do and what we should do.
Yes.
So please join me in thanking Jenny, and we can continue.